This is my audience. Okay. Yep. Today I will be giving a presentation on why you don't need to love bugs. Of the over 2 million species on Earth, invertebrates make up more than 65% of the total population. Of that 65%, insects and arachnids account for more than 1 million species. That's over half of the species on Earth. Insects rule our planet. We've all had experiences with insects before. The good experiences involve seeing butterflies and ladybugs, while the bad experiences usually involve roaches, spiders, and mosquitoes. And look, I get it, they have a pretty bad reputation, but these undesirable insects each have very important tasks to fulfill in their ecosystems. I may not be an entomologist, but I am a bug enthusiast. I've spent a couple years now collecting every insect fact that I've come across, and in doing so, I've learned that bugs do a lot more for us than we can ever imagine. Insects fulfill important ecological niches that provide us with food, plants, and clean natural areas. They may cause us occasional problems, but in our rush to vilify them, we run the risk of permanently altering our lives for the worse. So I propose that in order to secure our future, we must learn to work with insects, and should also take the time to change our perspective on insects altogether. They have a pretty bad reputation, and while I disagree with the amount of anger and disgust aimed towards them, there is undeniable proof that insects have and continue to cause issues for humans. According to the article Crop Losses to Pests by E.C. Yorka, the total global potential loss due to pests are estimated at losses of 26 to 29% for wheat and cotton, and 31% for maize. Pests can cause a lot of damage, and 2 pests in particular have caused massive damage to fields in both wheat and corn. The first pest is the larva of the wheat stem sawfly. As it moves down the wheat stem, they create weak points that cause the stem to bend and the wheat head to fall. This results in a yield loss of 5 to 10% due to the wheat heads not being picked up. The second pest are the 2 generations of the southwestern corn borer larvae. Both generations bore into the stalks. This weakens the structural integrity of the plant and can lead to potential fungal infections. Heavy infestations can reduce plant height and grain yields by over 50%. But agricultural pests are not the only insects we have to worry about. Mosquitoes and ticks carry what we call vector-borne diseases. These diseases can cause us to get very sick, and if left completely untreated, they can even kill us. Malaria is a disease caused by a parasite. It's transmitted by a mosquito. Its symptoms range from fever and flu-like illness to more severe symptoms like kidney failure, seizures, and even a coma. Lyme disease is carried by bacteria, which is carried by ticks. Typical symptoms include fever, headache, fatigue, and a characteristic skin rash. If left untreated, infection can spread to the nervous system. These are just 2 of the many vector-borne diseases out there. The CDC has informational pages on many different diseases which describe how to prevent and treat the illnesses if you do happen to become affected. But even with this information available, the reputation of insects still carries negative connotations, and out of all the insects, roaches and spiders deal with it the worst. When people think of roaches, they associate them with dirty places, and often contribute that uncleanliness to the roaches themselves. But roaches actually do the complete opposite. They're detritivores, meaning that they break down decaying matter. As Jessica Ware, curator for the American Museum of Natural History, says, they're like little sanitation workers. Another wildly misunderstood creature is the spider. Catherine Scott, an arachnologist at McGill University, says the vast majority of the spider content out there is about them being scary and hurting people, but spiders almost never bite. Insects fill many roles in the ecosystem. Some of them, like spiders, are pest control and help regulate populations, or they're like roaches and help break down organic matter. Some dig and burrow in the soil to allow water and oxygen to penetrate deep into the earth, while others float and fly through the sky, pollinating plants as they go. All of these play an incredibly important part in an ecosystem, but one of the most important roles an insect can fill is being a food source. Many animals rely on insects for food. In an article for the Wildlife Society, Dana Koplinsky highlights research from Doug Tallamy, a professor of entomology and wildlife ecology. He found that in the last 50 years, species that require insects lost an average of 2.9 billion individuals. Insects are obviously incredibly important, so what would happen if we lost them? It wouldn't be obvious at first. Most extinctions aren't. They happen quietly over the years, and they're easy to overlook. And in this scenario, insects will follow the same pattern, a slow, gradual loss. The first group to be hit would be our detritivores. Leaf litter and organic matter cover the ground and start to pile up. The nitrates and nitrites from the organic matter that the detritivores used to break down will never return to the atmosphere. Instead, they sit trapped in those ever-growing mounds. The mounds don't just trap nitrogen. Underneath them lay tunnels and burrows built by insects. These tunnels allow air and water to enter the soil, enhancing aeration, drainage, and porosity. With these tunnels blocked, water and oxygen can no longer penetrate the soil, which begins to affect the health and growth of plants. Plants that are too weak and frail cannot support the eggs and larvae of our pollinators. They are now left unprotected, and soon their numbers rapidly decline. Over 3/4 of the staple crops that feed humankind rely on pollinators. Our crops are now failing, but we aren't the only ones starving. The loss of these insects doesn't just affect our access to food. Plenty of animals consume insects as part of their diets. In fact, few terrestrial animals don't eat insects. But the animals most affected by this loss are carnivorous bugs and insectivores. Before the fall of our pollinators, our carnivorous bugs were responsible for managing pest populations and were most commonly found in gardens where they fed on various pests. Now that these food sources are gone, they are unable to maintain their own populations and are slowly fading into extinction. Many species will deal with the effect that this massive extinction will have, but none more so than the insectivores. With over 400 species, they comprise the third largest group of mammals. These animals rely solely on insects for food, and without them, their ability to survive ceases to exist. This was obviously a very dramatic example of what the loss of insects would cause, but it isn't actually that far from the truth. Insect populations are falling, and we're seeing the effect of that in real time. So how do we stop it? Trying to save the entirety of the insect population may seem like an unachievable task, but we've already started putting into action practices that help achieve that. Large agricultural businesses are partnering with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to implement new tactics to not only bring in more pollinators, but also to help combat climate change. Farmers are planting pollinator-friendly cover crops, field margins, and buffer crops that benefit pollinators. Some farmers have also begun to integrate other practices such as pest management. This practice uses current comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests and their interaction with the environment. While making changes at home may feel inconsequential in comparison to large farm operations, it actually does more for insects than you might think. Plenty of backyards are resting stock for insects like butterflies on their long migration journeys. One way to help insects and introduce beauty into your backyard is to plant native plants. They are good sources of food and shelter for wildlife and are naturally beautiful. Another thing you can do is create an insect habitat. These increase native biodiversity and pollination, and for smaller scale gardens and urban areas, plugs or transplanted plants from plots are preferred. While physically helping insects is a great place to start, one of the most influential ways to help is by changing people's perception of insects. The first thing you can do is learn. Learning about the benefits that insects can bring to us is important, and taking the time to share your knowledge is a great way to help. Another way to help is by advocating for them in politics. Political advocacy, especially at the local level, can significantly advance insect conservation. Everything I've said so far can help you help insects, but if I were to throw all that information aside, one thing I would ask you to do is care. Care for the insects and for yourself. They matter more than you think. We've talked about the negative aspects of insects and their bad reputations, the important roles they play, and the effects their loss would have on the planet. We've also covered some of the things that we've already done to help insects and some of the things you can do at home to help. I hope that the things I shared with you today will help you understand the importance to not only the environment, but also to you. The next time you see a bug, tell them I said hi, and remember, you don't have to love bugs, you just have to respect them. The end.